Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to FAO. Welcome to this IFISH pre-conference workshop, which is organized jointly by the UN agencies. The UN agencies here together are the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, the ILO, the International Labour Organization, the World Health Organization, WHO, and the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Welcome to all of you here at the FAO headquarters, where we are working with more than 3,000 people in this huge building. And this is 3,000 out of our 15,000 colleagues we have working for FAO worldwide on improving food security worldwide and reducing poverty in rural areas. Our fisheries and aquaculture staff in FAO adds up to nearly 500 people, and we are serving 194 member states with our joint drive for blue transformation, helping to improve the countries, the member countries of FAO and the stakeholders with improving their fisheries management, aquaculture development, and the development of sustainable value chains for fisheries products. I hope that you will enjoy your stay here the coming days in FAO, and you are our honored guests, and we'd like you to learn a lot about FAO and what FAO is doing worldwide, what we are doing in the coming days also, and we invite you to visit our library, our fisheries colleagues in the F building, the FAO shop with lots of nice merchandise, our restaurants and bars for good coffee. I also hope that you will find time to visit Rome, because many of you, it's maybe the first time that you have been in Rome or the first time that you come here. So take also advantage to see in between the sessions, take advantage of Rome, the eternal city, as we call it, the birthplace of Western civilization. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it's a beautiful place to visit. There are the Colosseum nearby. You have the Circo Massimo right in front of you. You have the Forum Romanum, Pantheon, Trevi Fountain. There is the Spanish Stairs, all kind of nice places. You have the Vatican, of course, and the St. Peter's Cathedral. So lots of nice places to visit, and so take advantage also of being in such a nice place. So of course, while there are so many attractions or distractions in Rome, it is definitely nice to see many of you already here for this pre-conference workshop, because the real conference is only starting tomorrow, but we really appreciate that you are here. So the 4 UN agencies that are presenting to you today have a lot of ongoing collaboration. We work together on safety. We also work together on reduction of IUU fishing, on pollution reduction in the sea, on droning prevention, reducing accidents, fatalities, better working conditions in fisheries and the aquaculture industries. And in fact, this is not even the only meeting that we are working together today. There's another meeting in parallel going on in Geneva, that is of the joint working group of IUU fishing and related matters. And that is held in Geneva and in Switzerland. So there is a lot of collaboration between the United Nations agencies through projects, activities, conferences, partnerships, and so on. Today, the 4 UN agencies will update you on the main international agreements that deal with fishing safety. And that is safety on board of fishing vessels, safety training of fishing crew, working fishing, and drowning prevention. Before I start, I would like to express my thanks to all the colleagues that have made this workshop, pre-conference workshop possible. And of course also the work on the conference. And I would like to name the main contributors were Florence, Doigu, Maru, Agnieszka, we have Rafa from FAO, We have Jennifer and KC from NIOSH, Julie and John from NEC and their teams. Without all of them, it wouldn't have been possible to have you all here together. So let's start with a round of applause for those who have really done the hard work. Thank you, thank you. Next, one other important thing is, and I wish it was a way, but it is not, we are still dealing with COVID issues. So COVID is still going around. And if you feel not secure or so, you don't feel, you can wear your mask if you want, you know, or there is enough space in the meeting room to sit a bit separate if you want to keep a more comfortable distance or so. Of course, the advice is, if you're feeling sick, then better not come, but follow the conference in the main meeting room, the red room. You can follow it online also. We have the Zoom link, which is shared by John, I think, and his team. So you can follow it online also in case you fall ill or so. It's not ideal, but yeah, we have to deal with the reality. Every pharmacy here in Rome is selling the COVID tests. And you also can get a test at most of the pharmacies directly, an official test. There is a 24-hour pharmacy near Pyramid. It is 10 minutes walk from the FAO building. So in case you need an official test for COVID, then please do so. It's only 15 euros. So we have plenty of space in the meeting rooms, so feel free to move around and sit somewhere wherever you feel is best. What else do I have to tell you is not too much, actually. I think we should kick off directly with our first speaker of today, and that is on behalf of the IMO. That is Dr. Olivier LeBrun. Olivier holds a master's degree from Aix-Marseille University in France in maritime law, and he qualified as a French lawyer in 2011. Before joining the IMO in 2023, he occupied various positions in the French administration, especially in the field of labor law, as labor inspectors, and then also as policy officer for labor inspection on board of French-flagged ships and fishing vessels. And there he was very much involved in the enforcement of various IMO and ILO conventions. Olivier is currently Senior Professional Officer at the Maritime Safety Division of the IMO and works with the Maritime Training and Human Element section on International Safety Management Code. On the joint IMO and ILO working groups, he's working also, and on the various elements of the human element at sea. So I was very happy to welcome Olivier to make his presentation to you. Please, Olivier, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond. I will deliver this presentation on behalf of IMO. IMO is the International Maritime Organization responsible for safety and security of shipping and the prevention of marine and atmospheric pollution by ships. And it also includes in its scope fishing vessel safety. IMO is very pleased to be invited at this IFISH6 conference, and I sincerely thank FAO and particularly Mrs. Florence Poulain and Mr. Raymond van Arroy. This presentation is about the revision of the STCW Fishing Convention, which we shortly call STCWF Convention. And we are doing at IMO a revision of this instrumental convention, and I'm going to present a highlight of this revision on how it can truly improve safety of fishing vessel at sea. Oops. So this international convention was adopted in 1995. It entered into force in 2012, and it's a binding treaty that sets certification and minimum training requirements for crews of seagoing fishing vessels, with the aim to promote safety of life at sea and protection of the marine environment. It is the scope of STCWF is personnel of seagoing fishing vessels, fishers, and big ships. And by big fishing vessels, we generally speak about vessels of 24 meters in length and above. Despite huge interest at stake, this convention has so far only 35 member states, compared with 167 contracting states for STCW convention, which is about seafarers on merchant ships. And this convention is a sister convention of to the International Convention on Standard of Training, Certification and Watchkeeping for Seafarers. And it was adopted in 1978. So it is for merchant ships. We often refer to this convention as the CW, which is a great success of IMO and which is broadly ratified internationally and broadly implemented. STCWF convention provides for both flag state and port state control, which with port state control officers allowed to detain a vessel until any deficiencies in certification or safe watch arrangements are rectified. I'm going to detail a bit, to speak a bit more about the contracting states, because this is really, I think, where we can make progress here. On this slide, you have all the current contracting states, and you can see that this is up to date, and you can see that some of the biggest fishing countries are still missing, such as China, Peru, US, India, Vietnam, Japan, Chile, etc. So by revising this convention, we really do hope to make possible more ratifications and to have to really improve this part. I'm going to just give you some a brief presentation of how we do adopt a regulation at IMO. It can be long. I'm going to be brief. We usually start with casualty from lesson learned from analysis of marine casualties or incidents, and from new technologies or any up-to-date revision or need to amend a treaty. And from that point, a formal proposal has to be submitted by a member state to the competent committee or to the subcommittee. The competent committee for the STCWF convention is the Maritime Safety Committee, and the competent subcommittee for STCWF is HTW and subcommittee, Human Element Training and Watchkeeping Subcommittee. Once this a new proposal is submitted, it is discussed, and it has to be adopted, etc. We set generally working groups and drafting groups, and once it is once the draft text is developed, it is then submitted for adoptal and approval. So this is the way that has taken STCWF convention and the revision. Why reviewing STCWF? I already gave a quick word. It's because there is the level of ratifying level is not totally sufficient. We can do better. And the other reason is that no amendments had been made since its entry into force. The second reason is that the structure of STCWF is very different of the sister convention for mariners, STCW, and this really complicates the good understanding and the good application of STCWF convention. The third reason is that the fishing industry is evolving quickly for big fisheries and big fishing vessels, and there is some need to modernize its regulation, such as taking into account the period of seagoing experience to be satisfied to obtain the certificate, the need to take into account the use of simulators for validating the certificates, and some other reasons. So we do really hope that modernizing this convention will give a good help to have more ratification. Here we have the path of the revision of the STCWF convention. So it was already decided 10 years ago, and we are now very close of this achievement. The Maritime Safety Committee is expected to approve the revision this year, and it should entry into force in 2026. The STCW as it was is here on this slide. It is structured as international treaties are usually so, with a general provision, the mandatory minimum requirement for each item covered by the convention, certification of officers, so skippers, engineers, radio operators, the requirement for basic safety training and watchkeeping, and that appeared to be changed with the revised version. We'll have, what is going to be introduced is a code. Many at IMO convention have a code, and generally speaking, the code develops and explains the basic requirements contained in the regulations. Part A of the code contains the minimum standards required to be maintained by the member state in order to give full effect to the convention. And these minimum requirements are quite detailed in a series of tables, meaning what kind of skills have to be obtained for each fisher to obtain a certificate. And part B of the code contains recommendations. And these measures are only, so they are not legally binding, but they generally represent an approach that has been harmonized by discussions within IMO and consultation with other international organizations. So basically speaking, the new features of this a part of the code, the new STCWF convention will introduce requirement for the use of simulators. It will also include requirement for medical standards on certificates, new requirements for officers in charge of engineering watch. And here, as it is shown on the table, we introduce new requirements for chief and second engineer working on board fishing vessels, with whom the total engine propulsion power is over 750 kilowatt. So because the risk at stake on these big vessels are higher, so the training requirements should also be higher. We also introduce detailed requirement for basic training and new requirements for onboard safety familiarization. So you can see that here the STCWF convention intends to really build a block to harmonize the minimum requirements for the training at sea. And by doing so, we will have better skilled and trained personnel, and it is expected that this will decrease the likelihood of fatal accidents And it will also decrease the loss of lives at sea and improve general safety of fishing operations. STCW also supports harmonization of qualification, and this in turn facilitates free mobility of workers between countries that have ratified this convention. And in doing so, we create a level playing field in this sector. I would like to give a bit more details on the code. The code develops the function that have to be obtained for each fisher. And 7 functions have been detailed. And for each level of responsibility, for example, management level, a skipper is at management level, he will have to obtain all the requirements for each function. So it's quite a lot of function that has to be obtained by each fisher, and especially for officers. If I take an example, for example, planning a voyage and conducting navigation for skippers on fishing vessels of 24 meters in length and over, operating in unlimited waters. The convention requires that the knowledge, understanding, and proficiency for planning a voyage, this kind of voyage, is acceptable methods of determining ocean tracks. And there are 7 others KUP. The methods for demonstrating competence is, the first one is approved in-service experience. And the criteria for evaluating competence is the equipment and charts required for the voyage that are enumerated and appropriate to the safe conduct of the voyage. So you can really see that the convention provides basically almost everything that from the what has to be included in the training program, and how to evaluate then the candidates who want to get and to obtain the certificate. And because now I think the revision document is more than 150 pages, so it's quite complex. We do hope that with FAO, ILO, we hope to update the guidance, which has already been issued and revised in 2001. Because we are talking to maritime academia, and they do need this guidance. I would like also to give more insight about what are the steps that are needed to ratify this convention. It's common sense, but it needs to be recalled. States may become party to a convention at IMO by depositing an instrument to that effect with the IMO Secretary General. But in practice, the major step for a contracting state may certainly be to implement the training standards at the national level. This means reviewing and updating the national maritime training framework, including the maritime programs, to ensure that the national, to ensure that it complies with the STCWF requirements. And to me, the second big step will be to train the fishing vessel personnel, and then to evaluate them, then to issue the STCWF certificate for each fisher, which has to get it in application of the convention, and then to carry out inspection to ensure that all fishers on board the fishing vessels that fly the flag of the contracting state are certified in accordance with STCWF requirements, including medical fitness, because STCWF revised includes medical fitness. So it's a lot of work, and to assist member states, IMO develops model courses, and here are existing model courses concerning the STCWF convention. Following the comprehensive revision of STCWF, these model courses might be revised. And I can also say that FAO is working closely with IMO to develop a new project called Safe to Fish. And this may include model courses or any support to developing state to ratify and implement this convention. Thank you for your attention. I will be happy to answer to any question you could have, and special thanks to FAO to inviting IMO, particularly to Florence, and I also thank the IMO colleagues for their support for preparing this presentation.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Are there any questions from the floor? Cor, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your interesting presentation. Maybe I didn't understand it well, but you mentioned that the scope of the convention in general is 24 meters and over. In general means there's more space, but then you say big ships. I'm pretty sure, and I was there during the revision, that the convention applies to all fishing vessels, and only Chapter 2 applies to navigational officers and skippers of vessels of 24 meters and over, and engineer officers of 750 kilowatts propulsion power and over. It's very important because there is a general misconception that this convention applies only to vessels from 24 meters and over, while watchkeeping, Chapter 4, and the basic safety training of fishing vessel personnel, Chapter 3, applies to all fishers. That's also very important because maybe a part of the people in here will be next month at the joint ILO-IMO meeting for the guidelines of medical examination of fishers. And the regulation said that everyone with a certificate, and it doesn't make a distinction between a certificate of competency and a certificate of proficiency, everyone with a certificate needs to have a medical examination. And therefore, it's important to know that the application of the STCWF, with no doubt, is to all fishers, regardless the size of the vessel and regardless the propulsion power. Thank you.
Thank you. Olivier, maybe you want to respond?
Yeah, in general, I can confirm the information provided, and I truly thank you for mentioning that. I can confirm, although, that there is a meeting in Geneva in approximately 1 month about medical examination of fishers, and for the goal of this meeting is to adopt the guidelines for the medical examination of fishers, and we invite all member states to participate to this meeting. Thank you.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Simon Potton from the United Kingdom. Refresher training for basic safety. I can't help feeling that this is an opportunity missed in revising STCWF not to include refresher training, which has been part of STCW since the Manila Amendment in 2010. Opportunities to refresh international conventions like this don't come around very often, and it's disappointing from my perspective that the opportunity not to include refresher safety training hasn't been included in this revision.
Yeah, I understand the concern expressed by the distinguished delegate of UK. I think what has been what has been decided at IMO is that it is not easy to attract member states for ratifying this convention. So I think it's a step-by-step approach. And so far, a lot of requirements have been improved. This is why I call this presentation leveling up the training standards for fishing vessel personnel. It's already much better. It's not perfect, but we do hope that we can hope to have in the near future to have another revision to include the refreshing the refreshing training included in this convention. But I think it's already much better. We have, for example, we have now more requirements for basic safety training, for safety familiarization for all fishing vessel personnel, including ratings. So that's already a big improvement, I think.
Sorry to be there again. The refresher is included now in the basic safety training in the SCCWF. In the revised SCCWF, Chapter 3 is a revision and a refresher training every 5 years included.
Okay, I was just looking at the list that you presented earlier on the countries, that have actually ratified the convention. And I note from my region, which is the Caribbean, there's just one country, which is St. Lucia. And I was wondering, as a small island development state, I was just wondering, are there any restrictive implications for SIDS in this convention? Because I'm seeing the convention as very relevant, seeing that SIDS consider themselves large ocean states at this time, and our resources are quite dependent on fisheries, etc. I'm also wondering, in terms of the training aspect, is consideration given to training the government officials like the departments of fisheries so that they can train their fishers, or is it expected that the training that these fishers receive under this will come directly from the IMO? Now, exactly how is the training done? Through consultants to the region or directly through the departments of fisheries?
So just to make sure I understand the question correctly, so you're talking about the training of the fisheries managers? That's correct?
Yes, the government officials, yes. Government management agencies for fisheries.
Yeah, but
yeah, it was just a question on whether the training actually goes to the government officials, the managers of the fisheries, and they in turn train the fishers, or if the training goes directly to the fishers from IMO.
all right.
Just a mode of training.
No, generally speaking, IMO does not train directly any professional or any seafarer or any fisher. However, first of all, the World Maritime University develops extensive programs for learning maritime law and maritime safety. And secondly, there are many projects to train specific administration or administration over the world. And there is one project which is currently being designed with FAO, which is called Safe to Fish. And the intention is here to offer more training capacities. Am I correct on this, Raymond?
Yeah, thank you, Olivier. This is correct. Together, the two agencies, and possibly also in the future with ILO, we are developing quite a large project, and which we hope to start within a year from now. countries that might be interested in benefiting from training on the international safety instruments can express their interest to any of the organizations, and then we can follow up with them. This is exactly as a training program with the World Maritime University and some other institutions for government officials. And it will, of course, focus on those countries that are that have ratified or will very soon ratify some of the instruments. So, because the resources are not unlimited, we will focus on those who have, who are about to ratify or have ratified already. Thank you. If there are one more question then from the floor, and then we will move. Oh, two more questions. 3, but let's do this fast. 3 more questions, because then we continue. First, the gentleman in the back, then Julie, and then you, please. So.
Right. So it was 35 states who signed to the convention. So I'm wondering, is it enforced or okay?
Yeah, the STCWF convention is already in force, and here I was talking about the revision of the convention, which is not already in force. It's expected to be adopted this year, and if it is adopted this year, it will be into force in 2 years later, so in 2026.
Oh, sorry, it turned off. I have a quick question. You mentioned that there is a medical examination that is that's required, and I'm wondering, is that information provided online, what the medical examination requirements are for fishers? Online, is there a way to access information on what is part of the medical examination requirement?
Yeah, so the STCWF convention already provides the minimum requirements, and we are going to explain it more, to develop it more in these guidelines that we'll discuss next month in Geneva, and all member states are invited to participate. We already have a good member states who will come, so it's going to be very important, I think.
Thank you. So Perry Smith from the Pacific Island Forum's Fisheries Agency. With the intent to increase ratification and only 4 of our 17 members having ratified this, the inclusion of the use of simulators being a requirement is concerning to small island developing states. The likes of Nauru does not have a maritime college, even though they have ratified STCWF. What support is there available to small island developing states to increase the ratification of STCWF, but also to build that necessary infrastructure like simulators in country to progress this work?
That's a difficult question. Could you please repeat? I did not really catch it.
So it comes in 2 parts, I guess. What support is available to small island developing states to promote the ratification of STCWF? And once they have, what support is available to small island developing states to build infrastructure such as simulators and the appropriate training facilities to deliver the training?
So thank you for this. Usually the cooperation programs are designed to a specific region at IMO. So I do not know exactly what are the current programs for each region over the world, but I will be happy that the conference is still going on until Friday. So I'm going to check it out and to send you the information over the next days. I'm sorry for this.
Thank you, Olivier. We have one more question, and then I would like to close the discussion on the STCW. Daryl, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Raymond. Thanks, Olivier, for your excellent presentation. My question is more general in nature, and to you or your colleagues at the IMO that you may be in contact with. I'm quite concerned about the pace of things that's described by your comments, the numbers of years to get the revisions in place, the small number of states that have ratified things, and the expectation that even with something that's approved, it's 2 more years, combined with the astronomical number of fatalities every year. What are your feelings towards the pace of this initiative? Is it satisfactory for you? What can be done to increase this pace? I know I'm generally accused of being impatient by nature, but I don't think there's any problem being impatient faced with the statistics that we're faced with right now. So I'd just be interested in the IMO's ideas of, is it going fast enough, or what can the IMO do to move things along at a more appropriate pace? Thanks for your time, and thanks for your answer.
Yeah, thank you for your question. The IMO's mandate is to improve safety at sea. So the Secretariat endeavors everything possible to achieve this goal. And all of us at the Secretariat, we do hope to do better. And we know that, as I mentioned, having such an important convention as STCWF with only 35 member states, contracting states, is not really satisfactory. But that's up to the member states to ratify the convention. So all we do is encourage ratification, participate to these workshops over the world, and designing cooperation programs. And we have done also tremendous efforts about safety, about the Cape Town Agreement. I did not, my presentation was not delivered about that topic, but IMO this last years had done a lot for pushing forward the Cape Town Agreement, which is not yet into force. It is very close to be so. And it is the main international instrument for the safety of fishing vessels. So we really, so many workshops, so many conferences were delivered to encourage ratifications. So we are really hoping that it will come into force soon, and to work with all the UN agencies to stimulate this process and to do better.
Thank you, Olivier. We're closing the floor now on this. I would like to ask Olivier to please share with us, with all of us, the latest version of the revised STCWF. So we have a copy. It's a draft anyway, so that is, you're allowed to share that without any cost. So that we all know what is the STCWF is about, and that maybe later this week, if you have any questions, feel free to ask Olivier or us or Cor, who has been in the process all the time. Ask anyone about specific details. So I would like to close the discussion on STCWF at the moment. Thank you very much, Olivier. And then we continue with the next interesting speaker, and he is from ILO, the International Labour Organization. That's Dr. Francisco Santos O'Connor. He's a senior specialist in occupational safety and health, OSH, at the ILO headquarters in Geneva in Switzerland. In his role at the Labour Administration, Labour Inspection and Occupational Safety and Health branch of the ILO, he provides high-level policy and technical expert advice on OSH to ILO member states and workers and employers organizations. He has held various positions in the ILO, including as an ILO medical advisor and chief of the ILO medical service even from 2019 to 2023. Before that, from 2017 to 2019, Dr. Santos O'Connor served as a senior specialist in IFISH at the ILO office in Bangkok, where he helped the countries in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific specifically. Before his life in ILO, he worked as an epidemiologist, and expert in public health preparedness in the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, which is based in Stockholm, Sweden, and at the Maritime Health Institute of the Spanish Ministry of Labor from 2004 to 2008, where he was responsible for seafarers' occupational health. Dr. Santos O'Connor graduated as medical doctor in 1997 and pursued a postgraduate training and qualification in occupational health and medical microbiology, tropical medicine and hygiene, and he has contributed to many ILO, WHO, UN and European Union projects, programs, many publications, trainings, and serves as a senior lecturer in international conferences, workshops like this, and university courses. So, Francisco, Dr. Santos O'Connor, please go ahead. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks again to the organizers. Well, you heard a long abstract of my biography, and one part of it, which is it's very close to my heart, is that when I was working as a maritime doctor, I was actually working in a place where most of my patients were fishers. So I have experience in doing these medical exams that we were talking about. I was also on board a hospital ship where we used to attend, fishers with accidents. And I'm sorry to say that the situation hasn't really improved so much over the last years, but we are doing our best. Yeah? So I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to introduce the topic a bit, and I'm sure you all know about how hard the working conditions for fishers are. Then I'll talk about ILO, what is ILO doing about this, and what you can expect from ILO. I'll specifically focus on occupational safety and health, and occupational safety and health standards, and there are some there's some news there. And then I'll also give you a glance of Convention 188, but I'm sure most of you already are familiar with this convention. But if we want to improve decent work in the sector, it's paramount that as many as possible countries ratify this convention and implement this convention. So I have a PowerPoint which has quite a few slides, but I'll try to go fast through them. What I already mentioned to you, the marine environment and how how unique this sector is. Fishers are exposed to to physical hazards, ergonomic hazards, biological hazards, chemical hazards, and then they work alone. Many of them work for long hours and away from their homes, which is a great psychosocial risk on its own. No? So it's basically isolation. The equipment is dangerous. Another challenge is that the payment is often based on share of catch, and this is really it's really an incentive to catch more, but also to maybe go a little bit, do a little bit of a transgression of all these standards that we're trying to implement, like long working hours. Like I remember when I was working, I heard stories of fishers being offered amphetamines by skippers to continue fishing because they cannot lose the catch. So in all these conditions, with the fatigue they experience and all these these risks. Occupational safety and health, which is basically prevention, is very important, and it's more important than in any other sector, because you have to think that, especially for deep water fishing, they're out there on their own. So once an accident happens, they usually don't have access to medical care or anything like that, no? So these are the conditions. And coming from ILO, another one I have to mention is the low degree of collective bargaining in fishing. You know, very few member states actually have collective bargaining for fishers. And this is also crucial for improving the working conditions in the sector, that the fishers are organized and that the fishers have a voice. And of course, forced labor and trafficking. And we heard before that there's a parallel meeting to this that's looking into IUU fishing. And all these risks that we're talking about are even worse in IUU. And forced labor, well, I'll talk to you about forced labor, child labor, and occupational safety and health in the context of ILO standards. This is a glance at the global figures for fatal accidents and diseases related to work, not only for fishers, but for all work-related accidents and diseases. And it's huge. These were released actually a month ago. And we are talking about an estimated 2.93 million fatalities related to work. And why do we have estimates? Well, you know, one of the big challenges, and it's even more for the fishing sector, is that we don't have good data. You know, even some of these HOSH standards that I'll talk about tell member states to report to us. You know, every few years they have to send a full report of occupational injuries. But then the thing is, many of the member states don't have good data recording systems. So the data is scarce. There's no data by sector, and very few member states really have good data. So we have to base all our policy has to be based on estimates, in fact. What about the fishing sector? Well, it's, as I said, it's even worse regarding data. We did some estimates in the ILO, but that was a long time ago. And already we were talking about 24,000 people dying every year. And some researchers now are talking about 100,000 fatalities per year related to fishing. Even if it's difficult to know if this figure, how accurate it is, but in any case, it's unacceptable. No? Now the ILO. Well, the ILO. I hope many of you have already heard about the ILO. The ILO was founded more than 100 years ago after the First World War in the Treaty of Peace of Versailles. And the idea was, you know, that the countries that had gone through all this suffering reached the conclusion that to achieve peace, there has to be peace between governments, employers, and workers. So the ILO was founded with this idea to achieve social justice, promote decent work, and dialogue between these three. No? In the very beginning of the constitution of the ILO, we already have protection of workers against sickness, disease, and injury arising out of employment as one of the objectives of the ILO. Now, the ILO is a normative agency. It adopts what we call the international labor standards, which are international legal treaties. These are adopted by ILO member states, but not only by governments, also by employers and workers, who sit every year in Geneva in the International Labour Conference and adopt these standards. We have two types of standards, conventions, which are binding, and recommendations which are non-binding guidance. Conventions become binding when they're ratified by member states. Again, as we heard from the previous speaker, the process of adopting a standard is a lengthy process. You know, like the Work in Fishing Convention took like 5 or 6 years. You know, just to be adopted. But then It came into force in 2017, while these discussions I'm talking about happened 10 years before that. The idea is that we cover all workers. Then there are some conventions and recommendations which are applied to specific groups or specific sectors, and there are also conventions and recommendations which apply to specific risks. Now, apart from these legal treaties or international labor standards, the ILO also adopts what we call declarations, and there's the Declaration of Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. This was a declaration that was adopted by the International Labour Conference, and it expresses a commitment from all ILO member states, and I think right now there's 187 member states, to promote, realize, and in good faith follow the principles and rights regarding these areas. And that's freedom of association and collective bargaining, eradication of forced labor, abolition of child labor, elimination of discrimination in employment, and occupational safety and health was just added to this list last year. Well, now 2 years ago, actually. So why is this important? This is very important, and it's crucial because all ILO member states are committed. They don't have to ratify this. It's not like the conventions. So from now on, all ILO member states have to promote, respect, and realize the rights to a safe and healthy working environment. And that includes all sectors and also fishers. These principles and rights are in Conventions 155 and 187. And it's basically talking about the rights and responsibilities of employers, workers, and governments with respect to occupational safety and health. Like it talks about the employer responsibility, the rights of workers, to withdraw from an imminent danger, the rights of workers to be provided with personal protective equipment, the responsibilities of the government to provide guidance for all these rights and responsibilities of employers and workers. And Convention 187, what it does is it provides a framework and a system to implement all this at the national level. And the idea of this system on occupational safety and health at the national level is that it gradually improves. It's I suppose you're familiar with the management systems approach, and the idea is that the same way that at the workplace we assess risks, and then based on this assessment we manage the risks, we do the same thing at the national level. We assess how the national occupational safety and health system of a member state is, and from there on we try to improve, through programs of a few years, and then we do another assessment and we audit how we are improving our national occupational safety and health system. So basically all member states have committed to improve their safety and health framework. There are, as I told you, many standards on occupational safety and health. In fact, there are around 70. And here I brought some of them. You can have the presentation later. Here are some details of what the ILO, that is the ILO Secretariat, which is people like me, what we are doing with in this respect, how we're going to support countries to be able to improve their safety and health at the national level. We are starting a plan of action where we'll promote the ratification of these conventions, and we'll provide technical assistance to countries so that they improve. Now looking in specifically to the fishing sector, there is a convention which is very specific to a sector, and that's the Maritime Labour Convention 2006, which consolidated standards for seafarers, merchant ships. And it consolidated a series of standards which were there before, and some of them applied to fishers. But in fact, this new convention doesn't apply to fishing vessels. So the International Labour Conference, our constituents realized that there could be a gap in the legal protection of fishers, and this is the reason that the Working Fishing Convention 188 was developed and adopted. As I just told you, this was the entry force of this convention was in 2017. Here you can see the member states that have ratified so far. There are some others in the pipeline, but as we heard before, for the IMO convention, many states which have a big fishing industry are not in the list. So we have to continue working on this. And I would like to call on you. Some of you may have some influence, or if you don't have influence, you can bring this up with your constituencies, with the governments, with the employers, with workers' organizations. Now, the way the ILO works is that we provide support through our country offices, and these country offices would channel any kind of technical cooperation that we could give. At the headquarters level, where I am, we usually support these country offices, giving technical advice to them in specific issues, like I do on occupational safety and health, but we give support in all the other issues which would be required to ratify and implement the convention. And I'll just go through the convention. The convention applies to all fishers and all fishing vessels engaged in commercial fishing operations. It defines what we are talking about, with commercial fishing operations. The only ones that would be excluded are subsistence fishing and recreational fishing. Now, the only thing is that there are flexibility clauses in the convention, and in fact, the requirements for vessels of more than 24 meters of length are more stringent. And what the convention allows is for some flexibility in the implementation. And this is, well, you may require the vessels of 24 or more, but for the others, you can gradually improve the conditions, like you can apply all the same conditions as you have for the 24 or more, or you can gradually apply some of them and then improve. And as we said, we have this idea of continuously improving the conditions. There's the concept also of substantial equivalence, and this is regarding hours of rest and accommodation. And the countries have this flexibility to according to their national conditions and practice, look for an equivalent of what's mentioned in the convention. And the accommodation requirements are more stringent for new vessels than for vessels that are already built. No? The objective of the convention is that fishers have decent working and living conditions, and it includes these conditions with regards to the minimum requirements for work on board fishing vessels, the conditions of service, the accommodation and food, the occupational safety and health protection, and the medical care and social security. Here I just brought the occupational safety and health provisions that are in the convention, because it does include a specificity with regards to the general duties, rights and responsibilities of employers and workers that I was talking about. In the case of fishers, the owner has the overall responsibility to ensure that the skipper is provided with the necessary resources and facilities to comply with the obligations. But it's actually the skipper's responsibility. The skipper has the responsibility regarding the safety of the fishers. And this includes supervision, it includes prevention of fatigue, it includes providing, they have to be adequately trained, they have to have adequate information to do their job. Another article is that the skipper shall not be constrained by the fishing vessel owner from taking any decision which in the professional judgment of the skipper is necessary for the safety of the vessel, but also for the safety of the fishers on board. And I'll bring another personal anecdote. You know, I remember when I was a doctor on this on this hospital ship, I actually saw that sometimes skippers are forced by the ship owners to continue fishing, even in you know, unsafe conditions, or even if one of the fishers needs medical attention. You know, these things cannot happen, or should not happen. Again, and you have quite detailed requirements regarding accident and health prevention. The member states have to have regulations in place for this, you know, for the prevention of occupational accidents and diseases and work-related risks. And this includes, as we said, doing a risk assessment and a risk management based on these risks. Yeah, and I'll not go into the details. As I told you, the Article 32 gives you more stringent provisions for fishing vessels that are more than 24 meters in length and normally remaining at sea for more than 3 days. One thing that is in you know, in all these provisions, which can have exclusions or which can have an application which is which can go gradually, is that all these flexibility clauses or exclusions have to be agreed in consultation with the most representative organizations of employers and workers. You know, the government cannot just decide directly that they're going to you know, exclude certain vessels or certain workers. Huh? There's also articles on compliance and enforcement. Basically, a flag state must exercise its jurisdiction and control over vessels, and for this they need an effective system of inspection, and with all it entails, you know, with the powers of inspectors, the training of inspectors, and all. And the you know, inspectors have to be able to provide penalties. There has to be procedures for complaints, etc. And the port state may carry out port state control. We have published guidelines on inspection for port state control officers and for flag states. So these guidelines are quite complete and explain how these procedures can be implemented. And the convention goes along with a recommendation which provides further details. The recommendation is non-binding, but it provides further details on how to implement the provisions that are in the convention. There's a role for coastal states here, and basically the role quite unique that is in the recommendation is that coastal states can decide that when they provide fishing licenses, these are subject to the vessels complying with the provisions that are in the convention. So, and they can be liable to inspection. We've produced quite a lot of tools and materials to assist countries ratifying and implementing the convention. Here you have a few. And you know, you have handbooks, you have guidelines. There's also training provided in the International Training Center of the ILO, but this is training directed to our constituents, which are basically governments, employers, and workers' organizations. And a lot of this work has also been done with our colleagues in other agencies, which they already mentioned before, some of the collaborative activities that we are doing, you know, different publications, projects, etc. So I'll stop here. In this, if you download these QR codes, you have links to the sectoral policies department, which is really engaged and focuses specifically on fisheries and all aspects of decent work in fisheries. And the ILO LabAdmin OSH branch, that's where I work, and we focus specifically on occupational safety and health of all sectors. Well, thank you very much, and be happy to address any queries that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Are there any questions from the floor? Please go ahead.
Yeah, hello, Darren Gard, New Zealand. So I guess my comments are for our friends at IMO and FAO and ILO, etc. Our industry is struggling a bit, and the results, the impacts of COVID on the global seafood sector have been quite noted. I guess from our perspective, being an island nation, but quite a substantial fishing industry, I think with the new regulations, requirements, standards, conventions and that you're talking about, they've all worthy outcomes is to keep our people safe and bring them home alive to their loved ones. So it's all worthy goals. But I think there's a few things that you need to consider from our perspective. The application, so there's certainly STCWF and 188, for example, the application is not clearly defined by our regulator in New Zealand. So I think more guidance to them about the actual application is really important. I'll also follow up on Perry's commentary around, when you're putting together these increased requirements, having a look at not just the member states, but those that haven't ratified, having a look at their ability and their resources to implement these and operationalise them is critical. And operationalising, I think, is really the barrier to introducing new policies, conventions and procedures. If the members don't have the resources and the knowledge not pitched at the appropriate level to actually implement them, then they will not, particularly in times of duress when they're suffering from market impacts from COVID, etc., etc. So really being clear around that, and something that we're working on in New Zealand at the moment, and this is something that we'll speak of in our piece, our talking slot on Thursday, is that through our psychosocial survey of our sector in New Zealand, our number one stressor has been identified as new regulation and compliance changes and implementation. So that's the number one stressor for our fishers in New Zealand. So we're very fortunate that the likes of our Minister of Fisheries and Maritime New Zealand, our regulator that works closely with IMO, are now starting to talk about a fisher-centric policy approach. So, I just encourage you going forward for any new policies, procedures or regulations, conventions going forward, that you just ask yourself the simple question, for our people and our family on the water required to comply and implement these, can they? Is it manageable? Will it put them under higher amounts of stress and require them to take more risks to pay the bills to feed their family? So, the fisher-centric approach in all policy going forward, I think, is going to become more critical. And we're in a time of change in the industry globally, and we need to think about those on the water and actually walk a mile in their shoes, rather than just assume that they have the resources and the capability to implement what we would all like them to do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Francisco, you want to respond, maybe?
Well, I'm not sure it was a question or more a comment and a suggestion for us, I think, which is it's really taken on board. I mean, you're completely right that we have to try to provide more guidance on the application, and this guidance has to be tailored to the national conditions and practice and reach the actual workers and fishers and skippers. And it's a big challenge for us because many of the guidance that we provide is at global level. So we try to, give a framework which can be used by everyone. But we can explore collaborations at national level as well. I was telling you that we work through our country offices. In the case of New Zealand, New Zealand is a quite developed country and it's very regulated, compared to other nations. And I would see more the collaboration with New Zealand, a collaboration that New Zealand could do to maybe give lessons learned and guidance for other countries to develop their policies and regulations. Yeah, but that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw 3 more hands raised. So first go to the gentleman here. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to refer back to the list of the special vulnerabilities and special features of work and fishing at the very beginning of your slide presentation. And certainly from the perspective of my organisation, the International Transport Workers Federation, we are very cognizant of the low level of collective bargaining agreements, which for us is the best safeguard from the point of view of instituting not a good health and safety regime from the bottom up, relying upon the various conventions and regulations. And we have set ourselves our task in the fisheries section of the ITF, which was only established in 2018, to try and achieve collective bargaining agreements with some of the world's biggest fleets and replicate the success we've had in the commercial seafaring sector. I just want to make two additional comments. In that list of vulnerabilities, I think it needs to be said migration and the preponderance of migrants in particular fleets is a vulnerability with health and safety implications in terms of the pressure many migrant fishers feel to work in unsafe conditions, excessive hours, and all the rest of it. And in a large element of our work in the ITF, when we're trying to obtain redress for fishers who have been forced to endure dangerously excessive hours of work, we're very reliant upon AIS, the automatic identification system, tools like Global Fishing Watch and so on, to try and reconstruct to the satisfaction of the authorities that we have had fishers who've been forced to work 20-hour days, sometimes 1 or 2 weeks in succession. But as we all should know here, the switching off of AIS is rampant. It is rampant and very poorly prosecuted and poorly regulated. I come from Ireland, and the Irish Maritime Authority has never once prosecuted a fishing vessel owner for switching off the AIS, even though it's there for all to see. And I think that is something that needs to be, we need to come to grips with to try and deal with the issue of excessive hours, of dangerously excessive hours of work.
Thank you very much for this observation. We have a lady in the back, please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So my question is about the port state control system of the C188 convention. So may I ask, is that going to be a, let's say, an independent port state control system from the MLC or the IMO current existed Paris MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and Tokyo MOU of the port state control? From the guideline, what I can see, it seems still to be a state independent port state control system. So may I ask, in the future, or would that be, let's say, a plan to have a more international collaboration system regarding the port state control over fishing vessels? The reason I'm asking this is because in the merchant vessel side, they can exchange information between different port states control. So if one vessel got deficiencies in one port, then the next port of call will be informed and then to conduct that inspection. So for the fishing convention port state control system, could you please explain a little bit more about that structure? Thank you very much.
Yeah, the convention and the recommendation, which mentions this aspect, is just lays down the general principles. It doesn't go into the details of how you actually operationalize this. And you can do it in the same way as you did for the MLC. Or you can do it independently. The idea is that there is a system by which the port state can carry out these inspections. We have further guidance in this guidance that I show you, but this guidance is not really binding. So possibilities exist of doing this, of collaboration, of bilateral agreements between member states, or regional agreements, or even international agreements, but it's not like a specific requirement of the convention to have this. There is it does talk about the collaboration between member states, but it doesn't specifically require you to exchange this information.
Thank you. Just to add to what Francisco was saying, under the FAO Port State Measures Agreement, there is the mandatory requirement for exchanging of such kind of information. So there it is happening. More than 100 countries have ratified that convention, and Florence will say a little bit more about it later. There are two more questions I noticed. Rajib from the left, and then after that, a gentleman in the middle. Rajib, please go ahead.
Thank you, Raman. I'm Rajdeep Mukherjee from Bay of Bengal program. Actually, I have one very basic question. Like, when you are defining this owners, keepers, is it as per any written agreement, or is it also applicable to the verbal agreement? In my part of the world, all these positions are very gray, all are kind of a verbal state of things. And second question is that, is there any plan for both ILO, IMO, and FAO that to expand the definition of IU fishing and include this safety standard, vessel standard in the so that these measures can make to the market? Thank you.
Can you repeat the first question, please?
The first question is that when you are defining owner, skipper, are they as per any written agreement is required? Because in my part of the world, all these positions, owners, skippers, they are verbally determined. There's no written agreement, anything. So how do you determine that somebody is owner or skipper in front of the law? And yeah, so that's the question.
There is a definition in the convention, and in general in ILO, you know, when we consider this ownership, you know, like more than ownership of the ship when there is an employment relationship between the worker and the employer. So this would be the actual employer that has a contract or an agreement with the worker, which is the fisher. No? So that's the idea. And the second, you were asking about the definition for IUU, was it? Or
can we include these measures into the market related agreements? The labor safety standard, can they make way to the trade agreements?
You can include, of course, in trade agreements, and this is something we do promote, that when member states do a trade agreement, that they include provisions for safety and for occupational safety and health as well. Yeah, and this is part of our work in multilateral, you know, cooperation and collaboration. But it's not something we can enforce. You know, but we do promote such kind of agreements. No?
Thank you. We have a final question from a gentleman in the middle.
Thank you. Peter Adams. I work with Ocean Choice International, which is a harvesting and production company in Eastern Canada. I guess my short question is, I noticed Canada hadn't signed on to the convention, which was disappointing and a little bit surprising, but I guess it may be explained somewhat by the fact that there's gaps in the gray area within Canada, because of course the fishery is overall governed by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. However, vessel operations are overseen by Transport Canada, and when it comes to occupational health and safety, it's actually been downloaded onto the provincial governments, and where they don't actually have much expertise when it comes to marine occupational health and safety. And in fact, our marine occupational health and safety regulations within Canada don't apply to fishing vessels. They're exempted, which is really quite silly. You indicated that there were some other countries in the works that were going to be signing on. My short question is Canada one of them?
Well, I don't know the list by heart, but you can actually consult this in our webpage. You know, you have the list of the countries that are in this pipeline. You have the list of the countries that have ratified, and you have the list of the countries in which the convention already has entered into force. Because you know, once they ratify, they still have 1 or 2 years for the convention to enter into force. So I'm not sure about Canada, but what you were mentioning about this gray area is something which happens in many countries. And one of the things that is in the convention is that there has to be a competent authority for fishers, and that cares about all these issues. And if these issues are scattered in other organisms, there has to be some way of collaboration between these authorities. And this is another thing which we are promoting from FAO and IMO and the different agencies, is that there is interagency collaboration at the international level, but also at the national level. Because as you were saying, well, in many places, the labor authority doesn't even visit fisheries and doesn't care about fisheries. There has to be some kind of collaboration, and because many of these labor issues are sometimes just in the labor codes, and they're not in the laws that are applied to maritime, or let alone fishing, which sometimes doesn't even have a regulation. So yeah, this is part of it. This interagency collaboration and this putting together the different competent authorities which have a competence in this field. No?
Okay, thank you very much for this explanation, and I think we can continue with the next speaker. So thank you once again, Francisco. And then I would like to introduce to you Dr. David Meddings. And Dr. David Meddings was born in Canada, where he obtained his degree in medicine and subsequent specialization in public health and preventive medicine. He has earned several awards, including the St. Stuart Murray Award and a fellowship from the Medical Research Council of Canada. His clinical work in humanitarian contexts began in Sudan back all the way in 1989, and included a series of missions in conflict areas with the International Committee of the Red Cross, where he ultimately served at the headquarters as head epidemiologist. In 2002, he was recruited by the World Health Organization, where he currently oversees the prevention, injuries, as well as leads capacity building efforts for injury and violence prevention. Dr. Meddings is executive editor of a range of global assessments and technical guidance on drowning prevention, and he provides technical support to drowning prevention efforts supported by the WHO in a range of countries, and leads the efforts by the WHO for implementing of the UN General Assembly and the World Health Assembly resolutions on drowning to coordinate actions on drowning prevention within the UN system. So, David, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Raymond. It's really a pleasure to be here. This is my first conference ever devoted specifically and exclusively to fisheries, and I would like you all to consider me an inquisitive 10-year-old because I have a lot to learn about your area of focus and interest, and I'm looking forward to seeing the presentations over the days ahead. With that said, I suspect my presentation will probably stand out a little bit from those you'll see over the coming days, and probably those of my other colleagues here on this panel as well, because I'm really just going to give you an insight into how the World Health Organization is addressing the problem of drowning at a global level. And of course, this conference is really focused on safety within the fisheries sector. And as we all know, one of the most dangerous occupations on the planet is to be engaged in the fisheries sector. And one of the risks, not the only risk, but one of the risks that comprises that sort of context is the risk for drowning. So let me run through a little bit of sort of high-level bird's eye view information about drowning. Over 2.5 million people have lost their lives to drowning in the last 10 years, and over half of those people were aged under the age of 30 at the time of their drowning. Those figures are estimates, and it's important to underline a few of the deficiencies in our estimation methods. I'm an epidemiologist like Francisco, and I don't like the state of our data gathering systems for drowning, but that's not entirely unusual in the public health field. But in terms of drowning, there are some important aspects of the problem that are not captured at all in our estimates. Transport-related drownings, or sorry, mortality related to transport over water is simply not categorized within the drowning estimate. So the entire area of most of what you'll be focused on in terms of the drowning part of the safety context that you're talking about for the rest of this week is simply not reflected in the global health estimates of the World Health Organization. Another major deficiency is our estimates do not capture disasters related to flooding, for example. Those are categorized into another area. So this figure of 2.5 million deaths over the last 10 years is a significant underestimate of the true burden of drowning worldwide. Notwithstanding that, we know that drowning is one of the 10 leading causes of death for people between 1 and 24 years of age in every single region of the world. Males are vastly more likely to drown than females. Over 90% of drowning fatalities occur within low and middle income countries. You might remember, actually I'll flip back to that slide, the gentleman fishing on the right-hand side of that slide is fishing in a vessel that is significantly shorter than 24 meters in length. And those fisheries related deaths due to drowning that, as I've said, are not even captured in our global health estimates are a significant concern for us. We've had a very limited understanding of the epidemiology of the burden of drowning in Africa for many years. As we are seeing more nationally representative surveys carried out, one of the things that's emerging from that fieldwork in a limited number of countries is the importance of the drowning burden within the fisheries sector within those countries. And that is small scale fisheries, typically with vessels of 6 to 7 meters in length, perhaps as many as 5 crew members, but quite often a single person going out on a vessel in all sorts of weather in very, very dangerous circumstances. So there's an important part of the problem that is related to a segment of the fishing sector that I think is relatively underaddressed in terms of the international instruments and agreements that we have in place today. I'm very, very happy that the FAO has undertaken to develop the voluntary guidelines for safe, sustainable, small-scale fisheries, because I think that's incredibly important. On the bottom of the slide, I've just laid out the different risk factors for drowning, and I think the key message to take away from that is there is no single sector that owns drowning. Drowning occurs anywhere you find water. Little children toddle away from their homes in Bangladesh and slip into a village pond. An unguarded moment in a high-income country can result in a baby drowning in a bathtub or falling into a backyard pool. And of course, as you will all be more aware than I am, fishermen and fisherwomen risk their lives every day that they go out on the water, as do people traveling over water in archipelago countries and any countries with a significant water transport component. So what has the WHO been doing in terms of drowning prevention? We've actually, I think, developed quite a sizable portfolio of activities around drowning prevention. We launched the Global Report on Drowning in 2014. This is the first time that WHO had ever devoted an entire publication exclusively to drowning. It essentially pointed out that drowning is a significant and leading cause of death in every region of the world, and it reviewed the scientific evidence for effective interventions to prevent drowning, of which there are several, and showed that these are both effective, cost-effective, and well suited to scaling in low and middle income countries where they are most needed. We have followed up that global report on drowning with a range of other technical normative guidance publications. These are aimed primarily at helping people, essentially working at the coalface, people directly involved in implementing drowning prevention interventions to ensure that those interventions are implemented safely and effectively. And that brings me to, well, you know, what are these interventions that one can draw upon in order to reduce drowning? There are a number, and they're sort of grouped into 6 different areas. So providing safe areas for children away from water where they have active adult supervision is a really interesting one, because as I mentioned in the example I gave of a young child sort of toddling away from their home in Bangladesh and simply sliding into a village pond, one of the key dynamics in drowning in low and middle income countries is the problem of unsupervised children. And from a public health perspective, this is interesting because if you can assure adult supervision of very young children through simple things like village-based daycare, you also achieve a lot of benefits that are attributable to providing daycare to young children. So it's an example of a public health intervention where there are some really nice synergistic benefits. Installing barriers to prevent access to water does not mean putting fences around large lakes or pools or rivers. Sorry, when I said pools, I didn't mean backyard pools. I meant pools of water, because putting fences around backyard pools is a very highly effective intervention. But simple things like establishing door barriers in low and middle income countries so that young children cannot egress out of their household and start moving around in the natural environment where there's water bodies. That's a very simple intervention to implement, highly effective, as are playpens. Teaching school-age children basic swimming and water safety skills is a highly effective intervention. This, along with the provision of daycare for children, are 2 of the interventions that have been probably studied the most deeply. And they're not only effective, they're extraordinarily cost-effective. They rank very highly in the WHO choice criteria, which is the sort of criteria metrics we use for looking at cost effectiveness of public health interventions. Moving away from those interventions, which are primarily implemented at the community level, we have a number of other interventions that often benefit from national regulatory approaches or national government involvement. So the first of those is building resilience to flood management disasters and better managing those disasters when they happen. That is an area where there's a very important emerging need, because as I think you're probably all used to seeing now, the weather is not the same as it used to be. And with climate change, one of the known effects will be an increase in both the frequency and the severity of flood-related disasters. And in every flood-related disaster, 75% of mortality is due to drowning. The area of intervention that I think will be of most interest to you is the setting and enforcing of safer shipping, boating, and ferry regulations. And this has really, I think, been the subject of a number of the early remarks from my colleagues here on this panel. And that's an area where I think national government leadership is critically important, and there's a lot of potential. And finally, training bystanders in the provision of safe rescue and resuscitation is a final area of intervention that is highly effective. And I'll just mention in connection with that, one of the interesting aspects about provision of training in safe rescue and resuscitation is that studies have shown that the average age of a person who is rescuing a person who's in the process of drowning in low and middle income countries is 4 years older than the median age of the person drowning, which means that if you have a very typical scenario as a 4-year-old who's in the process of drowning, the most likely person to rescue that individual is going to be an 8-year-old brother or sister. And so in countries where we're involved in provision of this training, we're actually running up into some very new, quite interesting areas which involve teaching CPR to 8-year-old children. And we're seeing that it can actually be quite effective. I'm going to sort of shift gear a little bit and talk about how drowning prevention connects with some international instruments. And the first framework that I want to mention, and I don't expect any of you to read this slide, so please don't even try, but I just wanted to highlight that within the Sustainable Development Goals, which sets out the framework for development assistance over the next, well, I guess we have another 6 years until we're at 2030. This is a critical instrument for high-income countries in terms of their development assistance decisions. Within the Sustainable Development Goals, there are a number of intersections between what is set out in the Sustainable Development Goal framework and drowning prevention. And specifically within Sustainable Development Goal number 11, there are a number of key references to the concept of safety. So the idea of safe occupations, the idea of safe and sustainable housing, the idea of safe transport over water is firmly embedded within the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are connections that exist and can be, I would say, leveraged by those of us who are interested in moving this issue forward to sort of recognize where those connections exist, because these are things that our governments have spent a long time developing and have adopted, and we should expect them to honor the commitments that they've made. Raymond mentioned that there are 2 resolutions that relate to drowning that have both come out quite recently. So in 2021, the United Nations General Assembly adopted its first ever resolution on drowning, and that was co-sponsored by over 80 member states. It recognized explicitly that drowning is a very multi-sectoral problem that requires multi-sectoral solutions. It asked WHO to coordinate drowning within the United Nations system. It declared July the 25th every day World Drowning Prevention Day, and it encouraged all countries, all member states, to implement WHO recommended interventions for drowning prevention. Now that resolution in 2021 has been followed up on by the World Health Assembly, which is WHO's governing body, by their first ever resolution on drowning that was adopted, I have to say, last year now in 2023. And that resolution went a little bit further. It formally welcomed the invitation of the UN General Assembly for WHO to coordinate activities on drowning prevention within the UN system. It also requested WHO to do 2 things, and I'll close out my remarks talking about those two things. One was to establish a global alliance for drowning prevention, and the second was to prepare a global status report on drowning prevention. So the first of those that I'll talk about briefly is the Global Alliance for Drowning Prevention. In a nutshell, this stems directly from the multi-sectorality of the problem of drowning. And at a global level, we're aiming for this alliance to provide a platform by which we can improve awareness of the multi-sectoral nature of the drowning problem. We can facilitate the exchange of information across members of the alliance and promote at a global level dissemination and uptake of evidence-based guidance for drowning prevention. At a more national level, in a smaller, strategically selected number of countries, we want to use this Global Alliance for Drowning Prevention as a platform to implement comprehensive multi-sectoral drowning prevention activities. This is the founding membership of the Global Alliance for Drowning Prevention. We've deliberately made the decision to start this as a relatively small alliance, focus on developing the strategy for the alliance, and then move to an expansion phase after approximately two years. So the alliance currently consists of a total of 5 UN agencies. They include UNICEF, the International Maritime Organization, Food and Agriculture Organization, and the United Nations Development Program. WHO is the host of the Global Alliance. And we have 5 NGO partners, one of whom is represented in the room, because I see my friend John Powell from the Royal National Lifeboat Institution sitting with us here. But over and beyond RNLI, we also have Royal Lifesaving Australia, which is probably the most preeminent life-saving association in the world in terms of work that's been done on drowning prevention in low and middle income countries, which is really our focus. The Center for Injury Prevention and Research, Bangladesh. I'll just mention that 64% of mortality in children between 1 and 5 years old in Bangladesh is due to drowning. The George Institute for Global Health, which has done a lot of work in this area, and Bloomberg Philanthropies, which is the philanthropic foundation of Michael Bloomberg, the ex-mayor of New York. So that's all that I'll say about the Global Alliance. Moving now to the final thing that I'll mention, we're currently embarked on our first ever WHO Global Status Report on drowning prevention. You might ask, well, what is a status report of the WHO? It's essentially a systematic data collection exercise that we attempt to carry out in every member state of the WHO. It's up to the member states to decide if they will give us the information that we are asking for or not, but we have a standardized tool that we have delivered to all countries that in this case is involving data collection across a range of sectors. We're really looking at 5 different domains: the area of management and coordination within countries around drowning prevention, whether there are strategies and targets in place at a national level to achieve drowning prevention improvements, data systems for drowning prevention, legislation and regulation around drowning prevention, and the implementation of interventions. So all of that sort of information gathering is done in as systematic a manner as we can, with a maximum of 10 and no less than 6 respondents from each country, meeting in a process that involves what we call a consensus meeting. This is coordinated through our 6 regional offices, and I think we have 150 or so country offices that are actively promoting this, and that data has actually all now been fed up through national data focal points to where I work at headquarters. So this is just the timeline where we are. So we've actually now just come to the conclusion of our data collection period. So we still have a few countries where we're getting some late data coming in to us. It all requires validation, both from a legal perspective, but also from a programmatic perspective. And we're on target to launch this report by the end of this year. We expect it to actually be launched in November 2024, having started in earlier in 2023. So that's all that I have to say, but thank you very much. And if this was a sort of an off-topic presentation for you, I apologize, but hopefully it was an interesting distraction. And as I say, I look forward to learning much more about the fisheries sector during my attendance at your talks during the week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Exactly 20 minutes, so you did great. Yeah. We have time for 2 or 3 questions before we continue with the final presentation of today. Please go ahead.
Thank you. It was an interesting presentation for sure. I'm just curious from your statistics, certainly in our part of the world, most people die of exposure prior to drowning. Does your definition sort of include those people as having drowned? People who found themselves in the water, have died of hypothermia, then are unrecovered, so to speak. Just curious how you guys look at that.
That's it's a great question, and it's a good illustration of the potential, I suppose, for limitations on data gathering. Normally, I mean, I've filled out lots of death certificates, and you're meant to put in the primary cause of death and then any sort of other related causes of death. So depending on the quality of that information, a good data collection system would record those as not being drowning, because they are not. Drowning is the process of experiencing respiratory impairment due to immersion in water, and it may or may not result in death. There are non-fatal drownings and there are fatal drownings, but the scenario you've described would not correctly be categorized as a drowning-related death. But as I mentioned, all of our estimates actually, anytime somebody gets on a boat and goes out on the water, it's not going to end up being counted as a drowning no matter what happens, unfortunately.
Thank you. Any other question, comment, observation? No? Then I have a question to David. Is it possible to share with the group also this General Assembly resolution and the latest one, the latest information from this World Health, how you call it? The World Health Assembly resolution, yeah.
Yes, I believe both of them are, well, they're all of those resolutions, as I think probably a lot of people would know here, are available online. Every UN General Assembly resolution is available online, as are the World Health Assembly resolutions, but they are also linked on the WHO website on drowning. If you just Google WHO drowning, you'll land on our webpage around drowning, and we have all of that information there, along with all of our other publications on drowning. Great.
If no further questions, then I would like to thank David for a great presentation. Thank you. The last speaker of today to invite is Florence Poulain. She is the FAO Fishing Safety Officer of the Fishing Technology and Operations team. Florence is a social scientist with a master's from the London School of Economics and over 20 years of experience in fisheries. Her work with FAO has focused on a wide range of aspects in fisheries, from international instruments, regional fishery bodies, disaster risk management and climate change adaptation in fisheries, to fishing safety. And within the FAO Fishing Technology and Operations team, Florence is now responsible for the development of the FAO Fishing Safety Program. She is responsible for promoting safety of fishing vessels and fishing vessel personnel, with a focus on small-scale fisheries and building the capacity of fishers to increase safety in fishing operations and improve the occupational health and safety in the seafood value chain. So, Florence, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my presentation will focus on some of the fishing safety issues and areas for solution. I'm hoping to set the scene and to continue discussion in the coming days. Okay. So as we heard, fishing is one of the most dangerous occupations in the world. We heard the ILO data. FAO had come up with new data a decade after ILO of 32,000 deaths a year. And but there is new research saying that this number is actually closer to 100,000 fatalities a year, which is not acceptable. Most accidents and fatalities happen in small-scale fisheries. We can make fishing safer through technological advances, implementation and adoption of standards, safety education and training. Also through fisheries management. Fisheries management and safety need to work together. But safety is also a social and economic issue, fishing safety. And so I really want to highlight this today. So fishing safety is not a new issue. FAO has been working on fishing safety since its inception in 1945. And in 1995, member countries of FAO committed to ensure that fishing facilities and equipment, as well as fisheries activities, allow for a safe, healthy, and fair condition environment and living conditions, and that they met internationally agreed standards adopted by relevant organizations. So that is in the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, which was adopted by all FAO member countries in 1995, so 30 years ago. The FAO Code of Conduct is even more important as we embark on the transformation of the sector, which we also call the blue transformation, which means also a safer sector. And so this having safer fisheries is becoming pressing because the demand for fish and aquatic products is increasing. It's increasing because of population growth, as you can see on this slide, but also because of the an increase in per capita consumption. So since 1960, the per capita consumption has doubled to 20.2 kilogram per person in 2020. These are data from the FAO 2022 State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture. The production is also increasing. In 2020, in spite of COVID-related impact, the production reached a new record of 214 million tons of production, and coming from both capture fisheries, aquaculture, and algae production. As you can see on this slide, capture fisheries is stabilizing, has been stabilizing, but fishing safety is still a high issue. Aquaculture, on the other hand, is the explanation for most of the growth. So if we want to have a sustainable aquaculture, we also have to, aquaculture also need to be safe. And there will be some interesting presentations and discussion in the coming days on this. In 2020, the fisheries and aquaculture production was worth 424 billion. Showing that the sector is important for local and international economies. Aquatic foods remain one of the most traded food products in the world. So that makes fishers and fish workers dependent on global value chain, and therefore they are under international competitive pressure, which has impact on working conditions. The sector provides employment to 59 million people. If you take the primary sector, the production sector, over 90% are small-scale fishers, living mostly in the global south. 21% are women in the primary sector, and 50% are women when you consider the post-harvest sector. And so there again, there will be some interesting presentation in the coming days on occupational risks in the post-harvest sector and specific occupational risks for women, for instance, in the algae production sector. So in total, we estimate that 600 million people depend on the sector for their income, livelihoods, food. We also estimate that there are globally 4 million fishing vessels, 2.5 million are motorized, and most of these motorized and non-motorized fishing vessels are in Asia and Africa. So back to my first slide, in 1995, member countries of FAO committed to a safer fishing environment. So what have we done in the past 30 years? So we heard in the previous presentations that we have worked on developing international instruments and implementing these instruments, but there is a gap, which is that the fisheries instruments are much less ratified than their equivalent in the merchant shipping industry. FAO, focusing specifically on FAO, so FAO has the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, which dates back from 1995. It has been widely accepted, but it is voluntary. We also have the voluntary guidelines on small-scale fisheries, which were adopted in 2014. The voluntary guidelines have specific language, specific text on safety, fishing safety, and also on decent work. And they're very interesting because they take a human rights perspective. And FAO is working on supporting countries in implementing these guidelines. And we also have the Port State Measure Agreement, which was from 2009, which main objective is to ensure that there is no IU fish product entering value chains. And that's also an entry point to ensure there is no, to ensure fishing operations are safe. And yeah, so this Port State Measure Agreement has been ratified by 70 countries plus the EU. So the point here is to say we must continue as, ILO, IMO, and FAO continue on promoting the implementations of these instruments. FAO has also developed some safety codes, safety recommendations together with ILO and IMO. So we have these recommendations, they can be picked up. What can we do to improve so that they are more widely picked up? We also have some training materials on safety at sea targeting small-scale fishers, which we have translated in local languages. We also have posters. These are all available for free. We have developed training of trainers. We training fisheries extension officers, fisheries training institutes to train small-scale fishers in safety. So this is also something which we have been implementing in the Caribbean, Pacific Island, East Africa, in Asia. We have some e-learning courses, for instance, on maritime traffic rule, which is also available. So what else can we produce to make a change? So FAO also has a long history of working together with national governments in improving boat designs and doing model testing and construction work. At 5:15 today, there will be a demonstration in the flag room of one of these model boats, so you're invited to come. We also have a long history of working with local boat builders in improving their fishing vessels. These are some examples. And all these are documented in a fishing vessel design database, which is also available for free and which contains more than 230 vessel designs. So this is our examples of the activities which we have been doing. So I'd like to conclude, to re-emphasize what I said initially, that safety is complicated because it is multifaceted. It has a managerial component, technological component, training component, and also legal component. We can make advances to make fishing safer through technological advances, standards, safety education and training, but also through making sure fisheries management and safety are not separated and working together. But we also need to address the social and economic issue. So my last word of conclusion is that as we transform the blue portions of our world, we need to ensure that fisheries and aquaculture are strong and thriving, that means are safe. And we must make the commitment made by member countries in 1995, so 30 years ago, we must make it a reality for everyone in fisheries and aquaculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Florence. Any questions or observations from the floor? Yes, Cecile, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Florence, for your presentation and to the previous speakers as well. I was glad, Cécile Brugère, my experience is mostly from aquaculture. I'm a freelance consultant. I was glad to hear you mentioned aquaculture and that aquaculture has to be safe too. It's true that so far the talks have been mostly focused on capture fisheries, and as a comment observation, it seems that the conventions of ILO dealing with capture fisheries are of more limited relevance to aquaculture, whereas those on dealing with agriculture appear much more relevant. And with regard to prevention of drowning, yes, it is so relevant in the context of aquaculture, especially small-scale aquaculture, where you have many village ponds, and often if they're fenced, it's to prevent the crabs entering, not the children falling in them. So there's a lot of work to be done on that front as well. So thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Can I just say that ILO is working on international standards, safety standards for aquaculture, and there will be, ILO is organizing one session. I can't remember which day, but it's in the program. And so I encourage you to attend and listen to what they're going to say and contribute to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, just to mention that the session is on Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, madam.
There's 3 people in one line. So we start very non-emancipistic. We start with the gentleman, and then here in front, Jennifer, I think, and then you in the back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Myself, Sabu from Gujarat, India. So actually, as part of fishing safety, so we know that the larger vessels or those vessels about 20-meter length, they are all following navigation. Like they are all learned or trained in navigational safety aspects, everything. But the smaller vessels, smaller canoes, or those artisanal fishing vessels, they don't know about the navigational rules and what are the things to be followed in the sea. And because of this lack of knowledge, there are many instances by which these larger ships, they may mistake it as what is the term? Or some collisions occur. So many casualties occur due to this lack of knowledge about the rules, the navigational basic rules of which need to be followed by fishing vessel. There are simple techniques or simple knowledge are available. All the vessels above 20-meter length, they know this. But what is these smaller vessels or smaller categories, small scale or artisanal fishing vessels, they don't know this basic knowledge. So I think FAO should take some lead on this, and so that many of the small scale or artisanal fishing vessels can be saved in this aspect. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a very good observation, and we're already working, for instance, with Maritime and Fishing Institutes on translating the materials we have on maritime traffic rules for local use. And so we've done that with the University of Shanghai, and we're going to continue with other institute centers.
Because why I just raised this question is that before joining university, I was working with this Indian government's Central Institute of Fisheries Nautical Engineering Training Institute. So I was an instructor in that institute. So when I got the opportunity to train hundreds of fishermen in this small scale vessel, so we used to train them what are the rules to be followed in the ocean or in the sea, especially in the territorial waters. But they said that, oh no, they're not bothered about this. They want, what they want is they just going for fishing. So it is their water. Okay, they are not expecting ships or other vessels in that area. And they said that they are not ready to follow those rules. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer Lincoln with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. Florence, I want to thank you for the presentation. Something that I think Darren Gard brought up earlier was the confusion over the application of these various conventions and things. And one of the slides that you showed, I think had them all listed, 6 or 8. And I know as it could be that I'm going to be vulnerable here and say that I even find it confusing. And I wonder if there is any sort of crosswalk or explanation or Venn diagram that explains what these cover, what they don't cover. But I find it very confusing and wonder how would a member state even try to implement one, let alone all of them?
Can I say? Okay, we have a brochure which is out there, which we have developed together with IMO and ILO, and explaining these various conventions. But I don't have the data, but I think some member countries are implementing them all. Is anyone wanting to comment on this? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it can be confusing, but yeah, you have to go one by one because they have different requirements, different scope, and yeah, I think very few member states would have ratified all of them, but maybe not some. I mean, some of the European countries, I think, perhaps some other countries, but I can't think now of an example. Like, yeah, but yeah, countries have to look at them all individually.
And no conflicts. There's not one that conflicts with the other.
No, in fact, they do overlap in some articles, but they don't have a conflict. In fact, when they are discussed, at least in the ILO, us as secretariat, we look into all these things. But also countries, they can intervene if they think there is a conflict with another. I'm involved right now in the standard setting for a new instrument on prevention of biological hazards, and some member states already brought up that there might be a conflict with this new pandemic instrument that the WHO is working on, and. What we are planning to do is have a series of discussions with WHO. But all these things are actually in part of the procedure. And then when it comes to the individual level of a country ratifying a convention, they have to look at each of them. Yeah. And as we said, it can be very complex because the different authorities and with different competences in different can be in different ministries, but this is part of it.
Right, and in your presentation, you talked about being an advocate for ratification for your particular country, and as someone who would be an advocate but not an implementer, it is difficult to figure out where do you start.
Yeah. Usually we would start with a gap analysis of the national legislation to see where the gaps are. And this is something in which we support member states to do this, when they're thinking about ratification of a certain convention. But again, any advocacy is welcome. Then the countries, of course, when they dig into this, they may find that for some countries there may be a lot of challenges, for others perhaps not so many. So.
Now, can I just add that it's not us developing international instruments. There's a request by member countries and they are discussed and then approved. The text is, I mean, you had the case of IMO when it takes, 10 years to revise an instrument, and that's really member countries. So, it's not like we're not imposing that onto member countries, it's the other way around. We're doing what they want.
Just to add here that, for instance, we have the Port State Measures Agreement of the FAO, which has been ratified by more than 100 countries now. The challenge there is that at the beginning of the ratification process, there's plenty of countries who like to support and put money on the table for helping other countries. It is not a long-term solution because these are project-based. So what the FAO now is trying to do is to establish a kind of fund, and that you have every year those countries that have ratified the Port State Measures Agreement, that they contribute every year to the fund. Countries that use the Port State Measures Agreement more will have to contribute more than, and developing countries or small island development states less. So that fund can then be used to for training, capacity building, awareness raising, changing the legislation, the policies, and so for implementation. So that process is ongoing. It takes time. And I can tell you, for instance, under the current Port State Measures Agreement capacity building program, the countries that are receiving assistance, and there are many, over 30 countries last year alone, received technical assistance and capacity building. They also receive information about the IMO and ILO port states control mechanisms and how they relate, and what is what are the coherent approaches for the port authorities, the inspectors, and so to carry out. So you don't do double work, or you don't develop completely separate checklists and all kind of things. It's all done together. So there is work there ongoing, but yeah, we always want that things go faster. Thank you again for your comment. We have one question in the back. Please go ahead.
Okay, so Desai Shan, Assistant Professor in Occupational Health and Safety, Memorial University, Canada. So thank you so much. And this question is related to my earlier question. So probably Florence and Francisco and Raymond, you could help me to clarify a little bit better about the port state control or port state measures regarding the C188, that convention. First, the reason I raise this question is also because Maritime Labor Convention and C188 are both International Labor Organization's instruments. While for the port state control, currently there is IMO Convention's port state control. So MLC shared with those IMO's conventions port state controls, while here for IUU, FAO also have the port state measurement. Then for the future C188, are we going to have an integrated fishery and fishing occupational health and safety governance under the port state measure currently being coordinated and led by FAO, or we're going to have a general maritime occupational health and safety governance, which means the C188 probably may share the port state control with the Maritime Labor Convention and IMO conventions. So that's basically my current question. Could three of you kindly help me with this question? What would be the vision of the future port state control governance mechanism in terms of fishing occupational health and safety standards? Thank you very much.
From those, thank you for this question. From those countries that I am aware of, normally when FAO works on the capacity building on the Port State Measures Agreement in the country, they are giving the lead to the government agencies in the country to establish a kind of interagency memorandum between the port authorities, the customs are there, the fisheries authorities, the labor authorities. So they sign a memorandum of understanding and they develop a work plan and try to implement that work plan. Of course, there is one leading agency often, or coordinating agency who provides a secretariat. And that depends on the country, which agency or institution is more stronger than others. So there is at national level, these cooperations are set up with support from FAO, but also by the other organizations. And it's a national choice. We cannot influence that decision. It's the government who decides. But collaboration is taking place. And we can share with you, if Canada is interested, we can share with you examples of such kind of work plans and MOUs with pleasure. Thank you.
So, thank you, Raymond. So basically that's very important because the reason is in Canada, as Peter just mentioned, is basically for different belongs to two federal departments and also provincial authorities. If we could refer to those work plans, it also could facilitate to lobby and advocate the ratification of C188 because in 2017, that was on the plan of Transport Canada to conduct the gap analysis between Canadian domestic fishing occupational health and safety standards and C188. However, after realizing the jurisdictional conflicts, so that basically being delayed until now. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Raji, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Raymond. Actually, my question is related to my previous questions that are hard questions. Actually, when we are talking about safety, are we talking it as a private good or a public good? Why even the international organizations are talking about safety? Because if we take it as a public good, a global public good, and it's a part of the Sustainable Development Goals, that makes it a public good, how can it become a choice of the country? It's in a similar flow that we are dealing with biodiversity loss and pollution. So basically, when we're talking about safety, it's a preventable measures that we are focusing at. And in a sense, not doing it contribute to the human misery. So it should be treated as a global public good. So where does the choice of individual country comes into the place?
I mean, I just maybe want, ILO has made it clear that safety and decent work is one of the fundamental, 5 fundamental principles of I don't know what you call them, of a good working environment. For FAO, through the small-scale fisheries guidelines, it's human right. Is that your question?
Okay. So it becomes a public good. And like any public good, its delivery will be dependent on the weakest link. So here when we are differentiating between the countries or the measures, we are basically justifying a country to play the weakest link. And for example, I mean, can we accept the same standard in case of pollution or other areas, which are also a public good or public bad? I mean, whatever way you look at it.
No, I think it's a very interesting question, and it reflects a really useful perspective for advocates to take. I work in the injury and violence prevention field. Whether we talk about unintentional injuries or intentionally inflicted injuries on someone else, the area of violence, they tend to involve younger segments of the population more than older. And one of the arguments that we use in advocating for more attention and more programming to be delivered for the prevention of either violence or unintentional injury is exactly what you mentioned. It's the public health, the public benefit through things like averted social costs. It costs an enormous amount of money to look after a child who's been victimized by violence at a young age and goes on to become a very damaged individual for the rest of their life. It costs a lot of money to look after somebody who has sustained a non-fatal drowning and has severe hypoxic brain injury. It costs a lot of money to look after somebody who's lost an arm. So these things are useful to kind of integrate into the argumentation around advocating for change and more prevention. But it's interesting that when you look at the health economics of these sorts of scenarios, the direct medical care costs and the social costs of caring for people who survive injuries are dwarfed by the losses to the economies in countries. So the indirect costs are substantially more important at the society level, and that goes directly to what you were arguing for with the public good argument. I think it's a very strong argument to promote. And so, you know, if you were to write a sort of a dummies guide for taxpayers of the world, you might sort of say, well, how can it be that only 35 countries have ratified a convention that at its heart is aiming to increase safety and save lives in one of the most dangerous occupations in the world? That just doesn't make sense. I mean, a thing I've been struck by over and over again, and as I say, I'm sort of new to your field, but it strikes me as quite dramatic that, you know, we've just had a plane have part of it fall off a few days ago. And you look at the, you know, the sort of the corresponding fallout from that event. It reflects an approach to safety and the importance of human life that the aviation sector has in spades. You know, every year there are fewer than 1,000 people who die in civil aviation mishaps. And if you reflect on the number of people who die after setting out on a vessel, on water, it's dramatically more. Now, why do we have a safety culture that has evolved in civil aviation, and we have nothing that barely reflects that in the context of people putting out on water? So I think there's a lot of work that can be done to advocate for change, and the public good is, I think, a very strong argument for that.
Thank you, David. I give the floor to Olivier.
Yes, thank you, Raymond. From the IMO perspective, I would like to underline that the contracting party to implement the international convention are the state. The contracting party is the state. So we are talking about public policies, public, for the common good. That's what I would like to add.
Okay, thank you. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up, corporately, the business case is clear. Improving your safety and safety culture from larger scale fisheries just makes good business sense. You reduce accidents, incidents, et cetera. It's obvious. But I think the issue here is that 90%, I think, were your stats that are small scale fisheries. And it's an individual, it could be ignorance by the individual, it could just be lack of resources by the individual. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that the fishery has to come to terms with. It's not that hard to buy an EPIRB, but if you, you know, if it's $200 out of your pocket, somebody's not going to buy an EPIRB unless you force them to. And in Newfoundland, where we're from, every year we have people that die and can't be recovered because we don't know where they are when they sink. So it's, I think that's the bigger issue, is that you're dealing with these small scale operators, and from the public good, it makes sense, but does that actually filter down to them? The business case in the private sector is clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this observation. I think we should close the session. I would like to thank, first of all of you for coming here in this afternoon, and the speakers, of course, Olivier, Francisco, David and Florence, for the great presentations. Tomorrow we will continue again with the real conference at 8:30. But before going home, I would like to invite you to go to the poster session which is in the flag room. That is on the other side of the atrium. The atrium is this big hall with the glass roof. So on the other side there is the flag room where there are at least 10 posters shown. And there is the stability, the boat stability demonstration by FAO naval architect Derek Meneses at 5:15. Then at 5:30 we have on the other side of the atrium we have a reception with free drinks and finger food they call it. That is a reception 5:30 till about 7:30. Everybody is expected to leave the building by 8 o'clock. Who stays later have to help us with the dishes. So that's. But please enjoy this informal get-together in the reception at around 5:30. But first, let's have a look at the posters, please. Thank you very much.